Post-war America. Let's talk about it. Hey, I'm Garrett, and I'm going to be talking to you about post-war America today. Let's start off simple. It was called the Cold War, because the two superpowers actually never faced each other in a hot military conflict. But they didn't always hate each other. During World War II, the Soviets and Americans were allies against Nazi Germany. But after that, things started to get a little spicy, if you know what I mean. America was a capitalist democracy, while the Soviets were run by a dictatorship. As you can see, trouble in the future was inevitable. After the defeat of Germany in World War II, the nation of Germany was separated among the Allies. The Soviets seemed to disagree with this idea, and the Soviets wanted to maintain control of places such as Poland, Czech, Hungary, Romania, Bulgaria, and East Germany. Why? Because they're jerks, that's why. In the summer of 1945, the Potsdam Conference was held. Joseph Stalin, the leader of the Soviet Union, refused to commit free elections in the East, setting the stage for the Cold War.
Guess what time it is?
What time is it?
Time for the mystery doctor. Mr. President, Mr. Speaker, members of the Congress of the United States, the gravity of this situation which confronts the world today necessitates my appearance before a joint session of the Congress. The foreign policy and the national security of this country are involved. Do you have any guesses?
Is it Eisenhower or Stalin?
No, it's Truman.
So this is actually the Truman Doctrine. Communism was taking over the world, so Truman put the Truman Doctrine in place. It promised to aid other nations struggling against communism. After Truman made the request, $400 million in aid was given to Greece and Turkey. The Allies were working towards containing communism within its existing borders. The Soviets made the Iron Curtain, which was a wall separating East Berlin from West Berlin, keeping West Berlin away from the resources on the east side and trying to get them to leave the Allies to join communism. It must have been one really big curtain. This led to the Allies taking action with what we know now as the Berlin Airlift, where the Allies flew planes into Berlin with food, fuel, medical supplies, clothing, and toys for the children. Stalin accepted his failure and lifted the barrier after a year. Then comes the NATO and the Warsaw Pact, or the good guys and the bad guys. The NATO included Belgium, Canada, Denmark, France, Greece, Iceland, Italy, Luxembourg, Netherlands, Norway, Portugal, Turkey, the UK, the USA, and West Germany. The Warsaw Pact included Albania, Bulgaria, Czechoslovakia, East Germany, Hungary, Poland, Romania, and the Soviet Union. Now that we settled that, let's talk about the Korean War. So basically it starts where China was all good, right? And then this guy named Mao Zedong took over, and he was getting support from the Soviet Union because he is a communist. So there was problem number one. China was falling to communism. In 1941, China officially became People's Republic of China. And that's done. With the new communist power, China proceeds to try and take over Korea, but only gets the northern half. Korea then splits in half at the 38th parallel, becoming North and South Korea. America involves himself with non-communist South Korea. In 1950, North Korea crosses the 38th parallel in an all-out attack on South Korea. 90,000 North Korean troops crossed over to the south with tanks and other weapons supplied by the Soviets. President Truman announced that the U.S. would aid South Korea. September 1950, General Douglas MacArthur launched an attack on the port city of Incheon. It was a surprise attack beyond enemy lines that led to the North Koreans being pushed north of the 38th parallel by October 1950. U.S. called it a victory due to this and the fact that it was an attempt to make a unified democratic Korea. While all this was good, it became a problem when General Douglas MacArthur kept pushing troops north of the 30th parallel. China eventually attacked American and South Korean troops. The U.S. was badly outnumbered and pushed back. MacArthur is angry that Truman wanted limited war and not total victory. MacArthur sends a letter to the House Republican leader attacking his policies. Truman finds out and fires him. The U.S. was sad for the big loss. In the spring of 1951, Allied forces grouped up near the 30th parallel. A stalemate occurred till 1953. No side ever advanced. The election of 1952 was really influenced by the war. Republican Eisenhower promised to end the war if he was elected. He wins and becomes president in 1953. Discussing nuclear weapons and Stalin's death makes communists end conflict. July 27, 1953, the ceasefire was signed and the war ends officially. After Stalin's death, Nikita Khrushchev takes over, who was the leader of the USSR. Here's a quote from the big man himself. "If you don't like us, don't accept our invitations, and don't invite us to come see you. Whether you like it or not, history is on our side. We will bury you." And that was Nikita Khrushchev, November 18th, 1956. The Korean War also ended the same way it started, with North Korea being separated from South Korea. In July of 1955, Khrushchev meets with Eisenhower in the Geneva Convention and a step towards peace. In 1956, Poland and Hungary rose up against the USSR. This started to cause problems. as the USSR took control of the situation. But that wasn't the end of that. The 1956 Olympic Games, what is now known as Blood in the Water match, was a water polo match played by the Soviet Union and Hungary. Hungary ended up winning and keeping any bit of pride they had left. After this, lots of other things happened in spicing up the Cold War. During this time, we got the Eisenhower Doctrine, the CIA, and in October 1957, the beginning of the space race in NASA. Both the US and Russia were creating massive amounts of weapons, always trying to be a step ahead of the other. Not only with weapons, though, with everything. The U.S. experienced the second Red Scare, the fear that the spread of communism in Asia starts to scare the American people. The House of Un-American Activities Committee, or HAWC, started to investigate the possibility of communist activity within the U.S. But the more the fear rose, the harder the investigations got. In 1947, the HAWC targeted the movie industry and hunted down anyone who seemed even a little fishy to them. The Hollywood 10 was a group of people in the film industry that were tagged with associating with the Communist Party. The Hollywood 10 weren't the only people suspected, though. Even everyday working people were fired because of this. Then we have the cases of the Red Scare, one being the case of J. Robert Oppenheimer, who was suspected to his wife and brother both belonging to the Communist Party. Also Alger Hiss, who worked up high with the government. But this difference was that he was found guilty after his name was mentioned in an investigation of ex-communist Whittaker Chambers. Hiss was sentenced to 5 years in prison. Stupid, call me. There was also the case of the Rosenbergs, a Jewish couple charged with conspiring to pass secret info about nuclear science to the Soviets. This was confirmed when their names were dropped by a confessed spy. They were then found guilty and sentenced to death and were executed by electrocution in 1953. The Verona Papers were also a series of messages intercepted by the U.S. from the Soviet Union. These papers revealed names of people who had been spying on the U.S. for the USSR. These papers confirmed the guilt of Hiss and the Rosenbergs. Senator Joseph R. McCarthy of Wisconsin claimed to have 205 names of secret communists within the State Department, all in an attempt to help his re-election campaign. McCarthyism coined for extreme reckless charges. Anyone accused of this instantly lost jobs and their reputations were destroyed. This was all working for McCarthy, even if it was a lie, up until he tried to target the U.S. Army. Because of this, McCarthy loses any support that he had and was formally condemned by the Senate for his accusations. 60% of Americans expected their earnings to fall after World War II. The GI Bill of Rights gave vets unable to find work a year of unemployment benefits. They also received financial aid for college. Also during this time, the baby boom occurred, where a baby was born every 7 seconds in the U.S. The population grew 27%. Inflation started to occur where too much money is being spent on too few goods. Prices rose 18% in 1946. During this time, the U.S. experienced great economic growth. The war brought the return of prosperity. On the political side of post-war America, Truman showed prestigious leadership in the most difficult times in America, like the beginning of the Cold War, communists taking over Europe/Asia, and the wave of strikes by trade unionists demanding higher pay to keep up with inflation. Even in his successes, there were many failures, like the Fair Deal Reform, not approved by Congress, legislative failure, and his stalling of the Korean War. This led to him not seeking Democratic nomination in 1952 due to his loss of support.
In the 1952 presidential election, World War II veteran and Republican Party candidate Dwight Eisenhower came out on top. For every obstacle, there is a solution. Persistence is the key. The greatest mistake is giving up. Dwight Eisenhower. Wise words there, Dwight. Mass culture in the 1950s started to become a big thing, with people flocking to the suburbs. Due to this, Eisenhower made the Interstate Highway Act in 1956, which was 41,000 miles of highway that eased automobile travel. People started to buy more and more, and the average family income rose from $3,000 to $5,000 a year. Rock and roll emerged as rebel music and helped challenge the current state of America. Elvis Presley was the man who set off the rock craze. Minorities started to struggle during this time too. Discrimination was running high in the U.S. and things were hard. Post-war America was a time of success and failure, but ultimately changed the nation for the better. Thanks for watching. See you next time.